next reader. Originally hailing from the peninsula, but now making his home in Danville, California. Not Danville. Anyway, he is the proprietor of Rudos and Rubes Publishing and the author of Rock Stardom for Dumb Shits. Put your hands together for Michael Lucas!
Back when I was a kid, life was going swell. Until something happened. Blew everything to hell. That night my daddy stumbled in, all pale and weak. Said a woman up the block just gave birth to a geek. Mom said, sell it to the circus. What the heck? Dad said, nope, this one's a pencil neck. And if there's one thing more than a sideshow freak, it's a gritty, scum-sucking pencil neck geek. You see, if you take a pencil that won't hold lead, it looks like a pipe cleaner attached to a head. And a buggy whip body with a brain that leaks. You got yourself a gritty pencil neck geek. Pencil neck geek.
Some of you are doubtless already familiar with that number by Classy Freddie Blassie, a novelty hit that since the mid-90s, I believe, actually probably earlier than that, the mid-80s. Freddie Blassie was one of the all-time great heels in professional wrestling. He later had a career as a manager of various heels. After his knees gave out, he had a recording career. He's in a wonderful movie with Andy Kaufman, My Breakfast with Blassie, which is a parody of My Dinner with Andre. Another wonderful movie that's not as easy to find, Mr. Blassie Goes to Washington. And if I may channel some of him for just a moment, it's good to see so many broads out here tonight. A lot of places I go, these dinglings won't let their wives come out and see me, but I say, let your wives come out and see the greatness that is Freddie Blassie. You can look, but don't touch, ladies. So, being a man who was there at really, the beginning of professional wrestling in America, there's a lot of good stuff in his autobiography. This goes into how he came up with his catchphrase for his opponent's pencil neck geek. But I didn't want to become manager of the meat market. I wanted to become a wrestler. I was starting to work the wrestling shows at the carnivals, walking past the hoochie coochie tent, the fortune tellers, the fire eaters, carrying my little bag with my trunks and gym shoes and towel. I could see the way people looked at me, knowing that I was one of the performers. If anyone doubted who I was, I'd say, why shit, watch me, I'm going to wrestle. The whole point of any carnival is keeping the marks in the dark about the techniques being used to separate them from their money. And I was as big a mark as anyone else there. Whenever I participated in a match in those days, I wrestled legit. Of course, my matches weren't the ones that people came to see. Every carnival had a routine that involved some kind of champ, taking on all comers. The first couple of volunteers would be plants, dressed like house painters or construction workers. The champ would beat them, but they'd get enough offense in to make him look vulnerable. Finally, some musclehead in the audience would take the bait, step forward, and say he'd like to try out the champion. Everyone in the tent would put up their money. Sure, the local yokel had what it took to get the victory. This match would be a shoot and really challenge the champ's abilities. He had to have the skill to carry his opponent to an exciting contest. You didn't want the fans to leave feeling flim-flammed, but know enough secret torture holds to ultimately make the challenger submit. At one of the carnivals I worked, we had a guy named Tuffy Truesdale who'd wrestle an alligator. When the creature died, they didn't have a replacement, so Tuffy went into the tank with the dead alligator to give the people their money's worth. He was rolling around, twisting the alligator's arms and head, and pretending that it was fighting back. It wasn't a spectacular performance by any means. There isn't too much you can do with the dead alligator. But Tuffy is the only one who really knew the difference. After the carnival was over, Tuffy threw the alligator in the Merrimack River. The next day, there was a big story in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Alligator found in local river. The reporter thought it had come from Florida or someplace and managed to swim all the way to the Midwest. I may have been a mark, but I sensed that this stuff didn't go on in other professional sports. Yet none of the older wrestlers was willing to smarten me up. In fact, they went out of their way to keep me confused. When they were talking to each other, they'd speak this language I'd never heard before, a kind of Pig Latin punctuated by Z's. It wasn't until years later that I figured out that they were speaking Carney. This particular dialect was known as Z-Talk. There was also a variety called Bell Talk that involved peppering your words with B's and bells instead of Z's and E's. I knew better than to ask anyone to translate. When the other wrestlers trusted me, I figured they'd tell me. Amazingly, some wrestlers continue to use Z-Talk in the WWE dressing rooms today, and I still can't speak it. Despite all my years in the business, nobody ever bothered to teach me this mysterious vernacular. I think that may have come from the Keith Elliott Greenberg who assisted. As Blassie himself says in this book, he claims to have graduated high school even though he dropped out and gone to a little bit of college, but he's well-read and he doesn't claim to be an Oxford Don. In the carnival, when I'd walk into a room where a bunch of older wrestlers were talking, they'd all say, kayfabe, kayfabe. It meant, shut up. There's a mark listening. I've heard a couple of theories about the origin of the term. Some people say that there is a deaf and mute wrestler named Kay Fabian. So kayfabe implied, go mute. There's another story that Kay Fabian could hear and speak, but he was a real gossip and pain in the ass, so nobody told him anything. Over the years, wrestlers would not only use kayfabe in front of outsiders, but kayfabe each other about news that wasn't meant to be shared. My friend Gorilla Monsoon, the late World Wrestling Entertainment Hall of Famer, had a New Jersey license plate, kayfabe, on his Lincoln Continental. Other Carney elements have also carried over. The insider term hood, to be heel for a villain, babyface for a good guy, juice for blood, and spoon for dressing room instigator, all originated in the carnival. When I meet a wrestler married to a stripper, and that's a pretty common combination, I think about the hoochie coochie girls who hung around the wrestling tent, watching their husbands' matches. One afternoon, before I was scheduled to wrestle, the guy who ran the tent suggested, why don't you go next door and watch the geek? What's so special about the geek? Oh, he's great. He bites the head off chickens. He bites the head off snakes. Jesus Christ, that's fucking horrible, I said. But who wouldn't be curious? So I went into the geek's tent, and not only was he decapitating animals, but sticking pins in himself and driving nails through his hand. When I got back to the wrestling tent, my friend wanted to know what I thought of the show. I told him, did you see what that guy looks like? He's got a neck like a stack of dimes. He's what you'd call a real pencil neck geek. And that's how my famous catchphrase originated. From time to time, when the carnival went on the road, I traveled along. The money was almost non-existent. But I got laid so much, I could have contributed some of the pussy to charity.